So hi everyone, and welcome to this conversation in celebration of International Women's Day. For those of you who may not know, International Women's Day is a global day celebrating the achievements of women across the world, and also it's a call to action in terms of accelerating gender parity across the world. So it's a topic that's of real importance and significance to us here at North West Employers, and we thought what better way to celebrate by listening and having a conversation with some of our women from across the Northwest. So my name's Sharon Senior and I'm Director of Membership here at North West Employers. And this afternoon I'm joined by some guests, and we're going to take you through what International Women's Day means to us. So first of all, if I'd like to invite Joanne to say hi.
Hi, thanks Sharon. So my name is Joanne Harding and I'm a counsellor over in Trafford, Greater Manchester. And I'm the portfolio holder for adult social care. And for me, International Women's Day is a really important opportunity, not only for us to celebrate all the incredible achievements that women have made over the years and continue to make, but for me, as we come out of COVID, if we look, for example, at the Oxford vaccine that was developed by a woman, and the fantastic team of scientists that were around at Oxford. So for me, it's important that we continue to champion healthcare for girls and women, not only in this country, but globally, really. So to make sure that girls and women always have their voices heard and have access to excellent healthcare.
Thanks very much, Joanne. And Nazia?
Hello everyone, so I am Councillor Nazia Rahman from Wigan. I am the Cabinet Member for Finance, Resources and Transformation, and for me International Women's Day is a celebration of our journey, of every woman's journey as a mother, as a worker, as an officer, every woman at every level. It is our journey across the globe, wherever we are. I think it is celebrating our achievements, being heard and being given that place and that space on the decision table. And I think this is very important for us, for today's women. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Nazia. And finally, Safina.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Safia Nadeem. I'm an associate working with North West Employers and a director of Purple Infusion, which is a consultancy working with around equality and inclusion. So I'm really pleased to be here today, and thank you for the invitation. I think this year's theme around Choose to Challenge, I think it's really kind of appropriate and very befitting of what's happening in kind of currently around, Joanne mentioned around COVID, but also the kind of inequalities that we see in society. And I think for me, Choose to Challenge is around, it's everybody's responsibility to challenge some of them inequalities that's happening. It's not for women, just for women to challenge that, it's for everyone. It's for our male allies, it's for everyone to call that out. And I think, you know, we see kind of sexism and, you know, inequalities, bias, stereotyping for women every day. And it's really important that we all call that out as much as we can and whenever we can. And really looking at the kind of day-to-day cultures of organisations. And often people think, well, you know, there's no kind of overt sexism, so people won't call out you know, names and obviously an obvious sexism. But actually, we know the day-to-day microaggressions that women face in the workplace and in society. It's really important that we all challenge and choose to challenge, and it's not saying, well, I'm not sexist, but how do we make sure that we're anti-sexist? And that for me means challenging at every opportunity. So I think for me, that's what Choose to Challenge kind of really brings out for me.
Lovely, thank you. And as you say, I think there is something about that calling it out, isn't there? And, you know, I think the whole premise of International Women's Day is around raising some of that awareness, and often, you know, people may be less aware of it. So there is something about actually, you know, raising that awareness and being able then to have the confidence to call that out. So I suppose just to get us started, I'm just interested in your own experiences of gender inequality and whether there's any personal challenges or experiences that you've had that you'd want to share. Again, open that to each of you.
Okay, do you want me to?
Yes, Safina, yeah, thank you.
So I think, yeah, being a woman, working, being quite prominent in the community as well. I think the stereotypes and challenges I faced quite a lot, and throughout my career as well. I think for me, what's really important in understanding the kind of intersectionality part of my identity. So I'm a woman. I'm a woman who's from an Asian background. I'm a Muslim. I wear a headscarf, and that kind of intersectionality all brings kind of intersectional oppressions, if you like, because I'm not just one identity, and it's identities are very complex. So I remember earlier on in my career when I decided to start wearing a headscarf. When I became quite practicing in terms of my religion, and somebody actually saying to me, and it was another woman saying, you won't get very far with your career in your career if you're going to put that headscarf on. So think about what you're doing. So these are some of the kind of challenges that I've had from a young age, and that's probably gone throughout my career. And it's not all the kind of overt remarks, it's the subtle things that people say. So I remember when I used to do training a few years ago in a council building, and the amount of times I've walked in to find out which room I'm in, and looking at a list of rooms and where I was, and people directing me to the English classes because they assume that I'm there to learn English and not to train. So these are some of the things that I experienced quite a lot, really. And I think, like I mentioned before, the overt things not as much now, but you still see them kind of subtle nuances and then microaggressions quite on a daily basis, really.
Thank you for that. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, to see, perhaps we might have time for this later around kind of reflections of, the progress that has been made, but actually there is still some way to go. So, and again, it goes back to that raising awareness and calling it out. Okay, thanks, Safina. Nazia or Joanne, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah,
Thanks,
politics is, it's not a secret that it is a male-dominated field, and it still is, whether we are talking about developing world or developed world, it is same everywhere. So again, as Safina said, I have many identities. I am a woman. I look different, it's different color, and I follow a religion. So it brings out a lot of identities for me, and to be discriminated on those identities, I think it's very common. Women like me, they are being discriminated on these identities every day, on every step of their career. I wouldn't say I have been personally discriminated on these, but I know these perceptions, and that is why I am here. I am here to be comfortable with those identities and to challenge in a way that is not very obvious. So I am not speaking against any discrimination, that I've been personally experienced, but my being here actually challenges all those perceptions and discriminations that people have their mind. So yes, I would agree that we are discriminated on many ways, but the only way to combat those discriminations is to be here.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Nazia. And I think again, your take and Joanne's take from a councillor perspective, I think there's that role within the wider community as well, isn't there? And that working with diverse communities, and actually again that role modelling in terms of the challenging some of the perceptions or the behaviours is really, really key. And I know you and Joanne have both been really influential in our Women in Political Leadership Forum, which has really taken off, which is fantastic. And I think it still, it demonstrates there are still some challenges out there, and it is really important to have the forum or the opportunity to share some of that. Thank you. And Joanne, finally on this particular area, your own take on things, please.
I think one of the things I found quite shocking, really, when I was both a candidate and then elected, was so my daughter was 4, I think, and I remember people saying to me, and women too, saying to me, well, how are you going to manage? And is your partner okay with it? And I remember thinking, is my partner okay with it? Do I was actually astounded that people would say that to me, but they did. And when it was things like, some of the council meetings are in the evening, well, who's looking after Grace? Or, it became that because I was the mother, that it ultimately became the default position that I had to take responsibility for being there. And I've always worked full time as well as being a councillor. So the other thing I found is the things that men will say. I'm quite short, I'm 4'9", the thing is, I don't think I'm 4'9", I think I'm 6 foot. So when but I've actually had men say to me, look, aren't you small? And it's just, I think you would never say that to a man. You would never say that to a man. So for me, it's just those everyday things that are wrapped up in a kind of banter, jokey type of thing. That when you challenge and then you're told, oh, don't be so sensitive or don't be so touchy, it's only a joke. But as a woman, we're supposed to just think, well, it's a joke. Well, frankly, it's not funny, so those are the kind of things that I have encountered and still do, but we'll always call it out, really.
Yeah, great, thank you, and thanks for being so honest about your own experiences, because I think that is really important. I think it links back to what you started with, Safina, around some of those microaggressions, isn't it, and not necessarily being so overt about it, but actually there's a lot that's either being said or unsaid, but the intention is there, kind of thing. So
I think Joanne's point around, people saying you're being oversensitive, you can't take a joke, and always devolving that kind of responsibility. It's not them, it's you, and giving that person down. It's a really good way that people kind of cope with it when they've been called out, but actually it isn't about the other person. I always say that kind of intention doesn't supersede impact. So if the impact is that you find it offensive, then that person should own that and apologise. But I think people hide in this disguise around, oh well, it was a joke, I didn't mean it. You're not taking the funny side of it quite a lot. It's a way that people cope with the remarks that they make.
Yeah. Well, you made a very interesting point, because I used to work with victims of domestic abuse, and the victim blaming culture there. I mean, it's very obvious, when we talk about domestic abuse, but victim blaming on a very, on slight footings is actually prevalent across our society. And we have to do that. If you are a victim, you take the blame and you feel more like a victim then. So, it's just all the pressure, and it's all, every responsibility comes to victim, that why did they end up in this situation at the first place? So, yeah, you made a really good point, Safina.
Yeah, thank you, Nazia. And I think just picking up on some of the things that each of you has said, there is something around what's really inspirational is, I think what shines through is that determination that you can challenge and that you can change. And I suppose I'm interested in hearing from each of you around the opportunities that you've had where perhaps you've been able to influence change, or if somebody's listening to this thinking, I've been in those situations and I'm not quite sure how to go about challenging or calling it out. So kind of, have you got any advice or ways in which you can influence change, and perhaps call out some of that bias that you might experience? So anything that you would want to share on that?
I'd like to use a personal example, really, Sharon, just to maybe try and instill some confidence in women. In politics, it's kind of felt that it's a safe environment sometimes, even in your own political party. And it's not always. Misogyny is rife, sexual harassment is rife. And I remember being subjected to some pretty awful abuse, really. And my default position was, oh, it must have been me, and feeling quite panicked and wondering what to do. But actually, and it can sometimes be the hardest thing to do, to share that information with somebody else, because I do think the default position is to think it's me. So what I would do is encourage women to always share that information with somebody else, because 99% of the time it is not you, it's the man who's the aggressor. And I think it's about sharing the information. If you're worried about something, there is always a woman within your network that is safe for you to share this with. So I think it's about having the confidence. And if you are women that are thinking of entering a political field, don't let that put you off. There are always really good women. I'm the women's officer in our CLP, and I really like to make sure that we throw the ladder down and bring women up of all ages. So I think just to instill a bit of confidence is to say, there are plenty of good women about, and don't ever be afraid to share that information, because you will find support out there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, Joanne. And Nazia, Safina?
I mean, I would say, yes, building a strong relationship or network around you so you can share your any problem or any issues that you are facing. But just be who you are, give yourself first priority of how you feel. If you feel that you have been victimized, and even though you don't have any basis, you are right, just don't question yourself and your instincts that, you are being discriminated or you are being victimized, and just be who you are. And sometimes we do take external world and their opinion very seriously. Stop doing that.
Thank you. And easier said than done sometimes, I think, isn't it, that? But you're right, there is something about that, authenticity and being yourself. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And Safina, anything to add to that? Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think authenticity is really important, and to be yourself. I think the thing around challenge, it's not easy. So, and often when people think about challenge, they think confrontation, and it doesn't have to be. So when I do kind of work with organisations and people, it's all around how do we challenge. And one of the things that I say, just by saying something like, what did you mean by that? Just to clarify what someone said or a situation, that's often enough for people to think back, kind of reflect on what they've said. I think it's important when you challenge. So you might be in a big meeting, someone's talking over you or putting you down. Is it appropriate at that time to say, I'm really uncomfortable, or you've just said this and that's made me feel really uncomfortable, or I'm offended. Choose your times, really, really, really important. Or you might think actually it's more effective if I wait till after the meeting and email someone to have a chat about how. So it's really important when you're challenging people in understanding, why you're challenging, the impact it had. And give opportunity for people to learn from that. That's really, really important. And I always talk about noticing and how it's important what you notice, what's happening around you. And as women, we'll probably notice quite a lot in terms of the microaggressions and people talking over us, and people taking more questions from men than women. But actually, men, how do they notice when that's happening, and what is their responsibility, and how powerful it would be when a man would say, I've noticed that, Joanne's been talked over quite a lot, or nobody's taken notice of Nazia's comments. That's really powerful. And I think for me, when we talk about challenge, it's about everyone's responsibility. It's not for the women. Like, women didn't create misogyny or sexism. It's for all of us to kind of come up with solutions and challenge. But understanding you sometimes need support. If you don't have a support network and you're continuously challenging, it's draining. But making sure you've got the right support is really important as well.
Yeah, and I think that's come through from each of you, hasn't it? That importance around either the networks or the support that you've got. And I suppose the thing for me is when you hear the choose to challenge, I think there's something really powerful about actually you do have a choice. So you have a choice of whether you choose to challenge or not. And I think sometimes people perhaps think, oh, I'm not quite sure how to handle it, therefore say nothing. But actually, that's kind of condoning what either has been said or unsaid, isn't it? So actually there is something about feeling comfortable to, as you say, and it's the way that you do it. So if it's it's an observation or what you've noticed, because some people, unless it's like anything with kind of any feedback, isn't it? Unless somebody points it out to you, sometimes you may be unaware of it. And they say the intention might not have been there, but actually that's how it's come across, and that's the impact of it. That people need to be aware of.
And I think what's really important is just because somebody's not challenged you, that they're okay with it. And we know that not everybody will challenge because it's draining, it's tiring. It's something that you face on a daily basis. You kind of you want to walk away from it because it's just not worth it. So I think it's also important when people say, well, that person didn't say anything. It's understanding that sometimes they're just not in the right kind of space to be challenging. Because we know this thing, it has impact on your psychological health and well-being. Weathering, it's draining. So I think that's important as well, that not all people will challenge.
Yeah, and that with said earlier, because I think International Women's Day has been around, it's over 100 years now. I think the first one was back in 1911. And I was just reflecting on, well, you know, kind of how it is for us now and some of the things that you've shared, what it was like then. And you think, well, you know, how much progress have we made? And you know, and how much more is there still to go, really? So just interested in your take on that in terms of where we are now, and I suppose thinking, you know, to the future. How can we role model and continue to influence some of the change, so that, you know, we still head in the right direction? So just again, open to any of you to kind of share your views on that, really, and your reflections.
Yeah, I think there is, we have progressed, haven't we? We have progressed so much in certain areas. We're just thinking about COVID and the pandemic, and I was reading some stats the other day where, you know, that women have been more affected in terms of job opportunities and kind of income. They've been obviously the main carers for children and for relatives and the community generally. So I think often, you know, with this kind of work, it's, you might take 5 steps forward and then you think you're 3 steps back because something's happened. So and again, reading some research the other day in terms of, you know, the gender pay gap, and we're still seeing that now, aren't we? Quite high. And in terms of graduates, women who are graduating alongside male graduates, as soon as they come out of university, they're going to be automatically earning 17% less than their male counterparts. You know, that's happening now. We're seeing a gender pay gap. So although we have made progress, I think there's still lots to do in terms of get that gender parity. So it's that continuously calling for change, isn't it? It's uplifting voices of women. It's making sure that it's always on everybody's agenda. Yeah. And for some men, people might think actually we have got that parity, we have that equality, because they're seeing it progress from their point of view. But seeing from women's point of view is a different thing, and I think we have still got lots to do. I've got 3 daughters. Two daughters are choosing a career in the NHS. And I'd like a place for them to feel that they can be themselves, but really achieve things, you know, for their potential, and there's no blockers and barriers there for them. So let's see if we get that.
Yeah, I think we have, you know, certainly from 100 years ago, we've come a really long way. I mean, the suffragette movement and women's votes and all of those things. But like, you know, likewise, I was reading some stats the other day about women in science and some incredible achievements with the vaccines and so on, but we still have challenges getting women to enter professions such as science. I mean, I have the portfolio for health and care, which tends to be a women's role. If we look at Nazia with finance and so on, some of those roles don't generally go to women counsellors. There tends to be a male-dominated split within certain portfolio areas too. And again, looking at the way it's fallen, COVID care falling disproportionately on women, and that's why it's so important that I fight for health and social care rates of pay, because it's women that are predominantly doing that caring, and it's about making sure they're valued in the workplace and they're paid for the incredible contribution they make to health and care. So whilst we have come a long way and we have a lot to celebrate, we certainly still have a way to go for women. It's a fight that I don't think we can ever give up. It's something we will always have to champion.
Thank you. And Nazia?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I agree with Joanne, and I agree with Safina that we have come a long way, and we are at a much better place than our mothers and grandmothers were. But I would say as the world is developing, you know, with technology and with all these developments, the discrimination that we face is becoming more and more sophisticated, because as a society we are becoming more sophisticated. So I think it is very hard to identify where you are being discriminated. For example, I mean, we don't know that whether we are being paid low unless you go actively and, you know, dig deep to find out those figures. So I think it's very important that we do that we are sensitive to that sophistication of discrimination, and then to point out and then to call it out. And I agree that, it is a continuous battle, that we have to speak louder, we have to be louder and clearer on, what we want, and especially caring duties and, the burden of care on a woman. It is natural to some extent, but I think society has to recognize and identify what our needs are. And it has to come from, from society. It has to come from our male colleagues that, discrimination has to be challenged on every level and in every way.
Thank you. And I suppose, so we've talked about some of the challenges and thinking about our role in how we can influence some of that change and some of the behaviour. And so I'd like to draw us to a close just by thinking about how we can celebrate women's achievements. And are there things that you're doing this year to celebrate women's achievements as part of International Women's Day? Or are there things that on an ongoing basis you think we could do to celebrate those achievements more? Are we doing enough?
Well, in Trafford, I have launched our launched an awards ceremony for the women of Trafford, and we have seven categories, sorry. And I've had over 100 nominations. It's been incredible, and some of the stories about the roles that women have taken on and the difference they have made to their communities has been incredible, really. But 2 points I would make from this. The first one, I really made a plea to make sure that we had diverse nominations, because Trafford masks a whole wealth of inequalities, really. And if you look at the north of the borough, where we have a bigger South Asian community, Black Afro-Caribbean community, I had to really do an extra push to make sure that we had nominations from women in those communities, because whether it was just that women don't like to shout about what they do in those communities, or whether there's cultural or language barriers about how that information went out there, but it certainly made me think there's a job of work to do there. And the second thing really to say is, how predictable are men? So as soon as I put it on social media, it was like, hello, the first man. Well, what are we doing something for International Men's Day? Well, off you go then. You go and organise something. But it was just the whole predictability of men hopping onto that thread to say, well, what are we doing for men? So this is where we know that we still have a way to go, when we've got to continue to make sure that we have a real, true, diverse representation of the women that we have, brilliant women in our communities. And another one, to tell men to just butt out and do their own stuff.
Good luck with
that. Thanks, Joanne. Nazia, Safina?
Well, I'm not doing anything in particular for this International Women's Day, but I do always encourage women to take on roles that they think are, male dominated, to take science and technology as their subjects, to be in leadership position. And personally, I like to encourage women to join politics, because I think, that is where you are on the table, and that is where you are under microscope all the time, but that is where you can make most of the difference. So I encourage women to be in politics.
Lovely, thank you. And Safina?
So I've got a few kind of events that I'm kind of speaking on around International Women's Day. I've got a Twitter group, Greater Manchester Muslim Network, Women's Network. So we're putting some stuff on social media, and really keep calling for change. Really, I do some mentoring as well with young women who are looking to change their career and progress. So I'll continue to do that and really kind of start uplifting voices and encouraging people to be the best they can. And like I said, I've got my 3 daughters who are really, influenced in terms of being strong, independent women. And actually they are quite a bit too strong and independent sometimes, but you know, it's part of their kind of DNA, you know, fighting for rights, equal rights. And I think for me, coming back to Joanne's point around diversity and my first point around intersectionality, understanding that, you know, there's different pressures for different people. So trans women, for example, there'll be different barriers for them, you know, women of colour, you know, women who have different faiths. It's understanding the additional pressures and the oppression that people face, and keep kind of calling that out and really supporting all women to help them progress or achieve what they want to achieve. So that's what I'll be doing through for International Women's Day.
Great, thank you. And I think you're right, you know, this is one day, isn't it? But actually what you shared there is, you know, there may be events that are happening just to highlight it, but actually it's an ongoing thing. It is of that, you know, that ongoing I suppose relentlessness to raise awareness, to call things out, to challenge it, but also to keep role modeling and keep inspiring, and you know, help us to make that progress. And I think it is encouraging that, you know, we have come a long way, but actually there is still a long way to go. And I suppose days like this are helpful in just raising the profile and bringing it to the fore, really. So thank you very much for your time and sharing your experiences with us. I think, you know, we look forward to kind of hearing what people are doing for International Women's Day, and people to share their stories with us. And I suppose it is that leaving people with a question around, you know, what is it that this year you're going to choose to challenge to help drive this agenda forward. So I don't know if you'd like to join me by doing our Choose to Challenge post for this year, and we'll put our hands up to make the pledge that we will continue to choose to challenge. So thank you for that. And as I say, thank you so much for your time. And